Alright, in this video I'm going to show you how I like to propagate Java Fern. Now Java Fern is one of my favorite plants. It's super easy to grow, it's perfect for breeding setups, it keeps your water quality better, and best of all, it's super easy to propagate, and there's so many different kinds of ways that you guys can multiply this plant. And we're going to cover all of those in this video, so stay tuned. Alright everyone, as you can see we have a few different Java Fern plants here. This is just the regular variety, but all the information in this video will apply to any kind of variety you have, whether that be the trident leaf or the narrow leaf and so on. So first let's cover why you might want to propagate your Java Fern on a semi-regular basis. Well, simply put, the more you propagate your plant, generally the more growth you're going to get, the more individual plants you're going to get. And so if your goal is to grow Java Fern, whether you're trying to sell it for a little bit of profit or you just want more of it in your aquariums, you're definitely going to want to watch this video and learn how to properly propagate the plant to grow it as fast as possible. So in my case, I'm growing this Java Fern in a relatively low-tech setup. This is actually the Java Fern that came out of my long fin white cloud breeding tub. And as you can see, it's relatively low light, low tech, and the rhizome of the Java Fern is pretty long, but actually only a small portion of it has leaves coming out of it. And this is because as the plant grows, it chokes out the older leaves as it grows up towards the light. And what you end up having is kind of a rhizome that, doesn't look very nice. And while this plant is still very healthy, as you can see, it's not growing to its fullest potential, in my opinion. And so for me, if I was regularly propagating this plant, I wouldn't have this issue. I'd be separating the baby plants, and there wouldn't be any issue of new leaves choking out the light. So that's the reason why I'm propagating and doing this video today. But there's many different reasons why you might be wanting to do this. And at the end of the day, Java Fern is a really beautiful plant, and any aquarium that's filled with different Java Fern plants is bound to look amazing. And regardless of your aquascaping skills, if you have a lot of Java Fern in your aquarium, it's eventually just going to take over, spread throughout the aquarium, and look amazing no matter what. Alright, and with all that being said, let's start propagating these plants. Alright, so before we get into propagating, let's quickly get some terminology out of the way. Now, Java Fern's a pretty simple plant, and it's very similar to Anubias in terms of structure. Now, if you haven't seen my Anubias propagation video, I recommend you guys check that out because a lot of the techniques that I showed in that video is going to apply for this plant as well. But just keeping it basic, horizontally here we have the rhizome. This is where the leaves originate from. From the rhizome, you have leaves that grow upwards and the Java Fern roots that grow downwards. I find the rhizome of the Java Ferns a little bit harder to identify compared to the Anubias plant just because the roots can get really, really thick, and the rhizome actually has more of a tendency to crawl along hardscape, and it doesn't always look like a traditional rhizome, although this is a pretty good example here. If you're still having trouble figuring out what the rhizome is, just simply follow back one of the leaves to where it originates, or just follow some of the roots back to where they originate. Alright, so first things first, let's cover probably what's, in my opinion, the most interesting way an aquarium plant propagates. And now, to my knowledge, Java Fern's the only plant that does what I'm about to explain here, although maybe bulbitis or other epiphyte plants might be able to do that as well. And that is to produce baby plants off of the adult leaves of a mother plant. But definitely this is one of the methods of propagating the Java Fern plant that occurs the most in my setups. Now, what's interesting about this method is that it kind of happens naturally, and in my tubs especially, I notice that little baby plants will just show up unexpectedly almost because they're just being produced off of the leaves of the adult plants. So down here I have an example of a baby Java Fern plant. Now, it's separated from the adult plant that it grew off of, although it still has some remnants of the adult leaf that it originated from. Typically, I notice when I add Java Fern to a new aquarium, if the leaves aren't perfectly adjusted to the water temperature, the water parameters, or even the lighting that I'm giving on that aquarium, I'll find that this kind of stress that I subject the plants to when I transplant them actually results in the adult leaves to produce a lot of babies. So I don't do this actively. I don't move around my plants trying to get the adult leaves to produce babies, but that's definitely a method that you could do and could look into in the future. For me, it just kind of happens naturally, but especially when I move plants around, that's when I notice the adult leaves that might not be well adjusted to the new aquarium kind of sacrifice themselves and grow baby plants that as they grow, the new leaf structure is going to be more adjusted to the water parameters and lighting that they're growing in. So I'm not 100% sure if that's the exact reason why this plant grows this way, but it definitely makes sense to me based off of my experience growing this plant. and the trend that I see that they typically propagate this way when they're exposed to a new environment. And this form of propagation doesn't always happen with the leaves. I've actually noticed quite a few cases where little baby plants would start growing from the roots of the plant. So this is a very unique and interesting way that the Java fern plant can propagate. For me, I let this happen naturally. I don't really do anything to induce the plant to produce babies this way, but definitely they still do it, and it's always a bonus when you have a couple new baby plants. You didn't really have to do anything to get them. I haven't done this personally, but you could probably stimulate them to produce more babies this way by constantly moving plants around to different water parameters and different lighting exposures, and that might stimulate them to produce baby plants that way as well. Alright, so let's move on to another method of propagating the Java fern plant. So naturally, when Java fern grows, the rhizome tends to split in many different directions, and this actually makes it really easy to propagate this plant. Simply, when you have a plant like this, you just need to take off different pieces of the rhizome that grew in different directions and just start separating them. You can do this by hand, or you can use scissors like this. It really doesn't matter, but if you have a big plant that has a lot of different rhizomes kind of bundled up together, little scissors like this make it really easy to get in and kind of clip things up, and it just makes the whole process a lot easier. For this plant though, it's pretty straightforward and it snaps apart pretty easily. And I'll just go through a plant like this, separate the rhizome, and pretty soon you'll start to see that we're getting lots of different baby plants from the mother plant. Alright guys, so as you can see, we're starting to get some baby plants, and this is looking pretty good. Now you could stop here and attach it to your hardscape, but I'll tell you right now, you're not getting the fullest potential out of these Java fern plants. If you really want to grow them and grow as many individual plants as possible, I'm going to show you another little tip or even a secret that I like to do that I don't see people doing online. I've been doing some experimenting with Java fern plants, and I found that this next method that I'm going to show you guys is really effective at getting the most out of your Java fern plants, and I use this to grow so many different baby plants for my aquariums and different breeding projects. Alright, so the method is this. It's inevitable that when you're propagating Java fern, you're probably going to end up with rhizome such as this that doesn't have any leaves on it. Now we could cut the plant about here, and we would have one plant that we could go plant in our aquariums, and that would be perfect. But what I'm telling you guys right now is do not throw out this bare rhizome. This is very important if you want to grow the maximum amount of plants as possible. You see, I learned this tip about the Nubius plants, and I decided to apply it to Java fern, and I found that it's very effective at growing baby plants. So for example guys, I'll just cut right here, and then we have one baby plant that we could go plant in our aquarium. But after that, what we're left with is this bare rhizome. Now most people would throw this away, but if you want to grow the most Java fern plants, all you guys have to do is plant this little piece of rhizome in an immersed planted setup, or I haven't tried it in an aquarium, but I'm sure it would work there as well. And within a couple days, you'll start to notice little baby plants starting to sprout up from the rhizome. This method works really well, and as you will notice when you start propagating your Java fern plants, is that you'll end up with a lot of these little rhizomes. And considering that this little 2-inch piece of rhizome here could give rise to 3, maybe 4 little tiny Java fern plants, those numbers really add up when you're dealing with more plants when you're propagating them. Alright guys, so here's another example. This Java fern plant looks terrible. It was actually, I found it in one of my tubs. It was covered in some other moss, so it was getting pretty much no light, and as you can see, the leaves just look horrible. They're not healthy at all. But what I want you guys to notice is look at how green and how vibrant the rhizome is of this plant. Now what this means, and this also applies to Anubias plants by the way, is that it has photosynthetic pigments that allow it to photosynthesize and convert your light from your aquarium into energy, and that energy will be used to produce more cell structure. Now basically what that translates to is these rhizomes have what it takes to produce new baby plants. So even if you have a Java fern plant that looks totally crummy like this one, by using this technique and splitting up the rhizomes, planting them in an immersed setup that's abundant in CO2, has maybe a lot of sunlight landing on it, it's inevitable that this plant's gonna grow. It's gonna produce more roots, pick up more nutrients from the soil, and then eventually it's gonna give rise to baby plant. And if you guys aren't a big fan of immersed plants, that's fine. After the baby plants start growing a little bit in the thing, you can easily convert them back into your aquarium, and they'll continue growing there with submerged growth, and then you'll have even more beautiful Java fern plants that you didn't even realize that you could have had. Alright, and there you guys have it, how to propagate your Java fern plants. Like I said, this is an amazing plant, so I recommend you guys go out and propagate your Java fern plants, and leave a comment down below how that goes. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Really appreciate it. Leave a like if you like this video, and consider subscribing if you want to see some more videos like this. Until next time, I'll see you guys later.